fuck you, Eddie Van Halen, for saying that. Asshole.
Yeah, that's Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Zach Adkins, and in this video, we're going to talk about the animosity between Sammy Hagar and Eddie Van Halen. Let's get into it. So, of course, it's no secret that Eddie Van Halen and Sammy Hagar, and really, it's probably more like the Van Halen brothers in general. In this instance, I'm going to talk probably more about Eddie because there's just more that Eddie has said than Alex does, but we could just say the Van Halens too. This is not the first time that this has been talked about, that there's this animosity between them, and that's why a lot of the tensions arose and the band broke up from him and they got a different singer, and then they tried to do a reunion tour and the reunion tour didn't work out crazy enough. I don't know, I thought it was just an interesting topic. I'm not the first person to bring it up, but it's my YouTube channel and I want to talk about it, so we're going to talk about it. I want to dive into a couple of quotes and stuff, interviews from either like a magazine or even like their own books and stuff where they talk about the individual members and how everything went down. It's just I thought it was an interesting topic, so here we go. Let's talk about it. Sammy Hagar replaced David Lee Roth in 1985, which already is kind of a great way to start this off because David Lee Roth left. He went and did his solo career. And I can imagine that David Lee Roth, even today, is a difficult person to work with. He is extremely we'll say flamboyant, egotistical, and although he's really funny, I've watched a bunch of interviews and stuff, he's hilarious, but after, I don't know, 10 minutes of it, you're probably going to be like, okay, this guy needs to just be quiet. That's kind of the thing that makes singers. It attracts people that are like that. Although Sammy Hagar is not as flamboyant about it, he still is egotistical. He had his own Sammy Hagar band. He plays guitar and he's a good singer. There's all of this that goes into what makes singers the way they are and what makes guitar players and drummers the way they are. And there's always this battle between the two. You can imagine the Van Halen brothers, Alex and Eddie, weren't really easy to work with either, but not necessarily because of their flamboyancy and their what's the word? Because of how external they were, but more because of how internal they were with the band. Because it's Van Halen. They're the brothers. They started it. It's their band. And you're never going to kick Eddie Van Halen out of Van Halen. You're never going to kick Alex Van Halen out of Van Halen. It's their band. And then, of course, way later when they brought, Wolfgang in, they got 3 Van Halens. You're the odd man out no matter who you are. I think that when somebody comes into Van Halen, you're always going to feel pushed out because they're not going to, they're brothers. They might fight, argue, and do the brother stuff, but they're never going to separate from one another. And you're just always going to be an added person to the Van Halen band/brand. That's hard for singers because singers are egotistical. They want to be the person of the band. If they're not good songwriters, or if they themselves can't get a band together that makes sense like the Van Halens did, then you're kind of just stuck. One thing here I want to look at, I got some instances here. The first one is in 2011 in the memoir Red, My Uncensored Life and Rock. Sammy Hagar was very blunt about Eddie Van Halen, saying, Eddie is a genius guitar player, but he's not a genius when it comes to running a band. He also criticized Eddie for his inability to manage relationships and pointed out how Eddie's personal issues, including his battles with alcoholism, strained the collaboration. Hagar's critique of Eddie's management style was part of a broader frustration that he had with Eddie, who was increasingly controlling as the band's success grew. Hagar felt Eddie often played a role in creating chaos within the group, particularly with the substance abuse and volatile behavior. I think that's kind of an interesting way of looking at it because, real quick, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure that you do, because only 7% of people that are watching my videos are subscribed. Just go ahead and click it real quick. It takes 2 seconds and it's free and it helps me out. Please, thank you very much. Okay, bye. Get back to the video. Van Halen was already successful before Hagar came into the band. For him to say that he's not a genius when it comes to running a band, that's a weird, petty thing to say, in my opinion. And of course, Eddie was known for being pretty erratic and, alcohol, drugs, and all that stuff. But it'd be kind of difficult to say that he didn't have a good way of making a band go, because look at how successful they were. And he joined Van Halen. It wasn't the other way around. So in this instance, I'd probably have to go on the side of Eddie and say, well, you might not like the way it's ran, but it doesn't mean it can't be ran successfully. It's just the Van Halen's way of being successful. That's how I choose to look at that. And I am a little biased because I'm a guitar player and I really like Eddie Van Halen, obviously. I think there might be a few points in here where I won't be siding with Eddie or the Van Halens in general. This is what Eddie had to say about Sammy. This is in 1996 with Guitar World. He says, Sammy's a great singer, but there's a reason I went out of my way to make it clear that I didn't want to continue working with him. I just couldn't take it anymore. It was either Sammy or the band, and I chose the band. Eddie admitted that working with Hagar had become unbearable due to his attitude, Hagar's attitude, and his growing desire for more control. Eddie also pointed to Hagar's personality and ego as a source of conflict. So that goes back to what I just said at the beginning. When you join Van Halen, it's always going to be Van Halen. They are always going to choose each other. Even if they're pissed, even if Alex and Eddie were like maybe fighting themselves and maybe they didn't agree, they're never going to give up the Van Halen name. They're never going to break that apart. So you're going to lose. 9 out of 10 times you're going to lose. As far as him being upset that Sammy wanted more control, I don't like that, because this is where I won't agree with Eddie in the sense of he should have let Sammy have more control. And again, I get it, it's Van Halen, but at a certain point too, you brought in somebody like Sammy Hagar to pull something else out of the band that wasn't there. And they did have really great commercial success with Hagar. They made a lot of money when he was in the band. I guess at what point do you say how much control is enough for somebody and not enough for somebody? And both of them are going to disagree on pretty much the entire fundamentals of how much I want versus how much you want. I want this much, you want that much of control for me. And then it just becomes this like whirlwind of just pissing each other off. The next one was the breakdown on the relationship. Sammy Hagar revealed the depths of the breakdown in 2004 interview where he says, it got so bad with Eddie that it was like being in a relationship with a woman who doesn't trust you and is always accusing you of stuff. He was very jealous and I couldn't take it anymore. I had to leave. Hagar's departure in 1996 followed years of tension. Sammy felt that Eddie's jealousy, controlling issues, and volatile behavior led to a volatile situation. The Van Halen brothers, especially Eddie, were reportedly difficult to deal with, as Hagar felt that they no longer cared about the band's collective success. I can see that Eddie would get kind of jealous, and really the Van Halens in general, because it's like, we have this massive brand, and maybe you're not, as Hagar, maybe they're looking at him going, you're not part of this, or you're not trying to push this the way we want it to. And then again, you have to look back and say, okay, well, guys, they're not Van Halens. You are. So their success, not being a Van Halen, might be different than your success as a Van Halen, because they're not going to always align. However, I could see that in Eddie's mind, he probably got really, I'm going to use the word abusive a little bit loosely here, because I have seen how he talks to people, and it comes off very brash. It can come off very not nice, we'll say. It can kind of warp your mind about the situation too. You know, that's what drugs do. And if you've talked yourself into believing somebody, as in Eddie not believing that Hagar had their best interest in heart, you start like concocting all of these stories and ideas in your head that don't necessarily add up to the truth, and that can still cause you to react horribly towards that other person. So I could see why Hagar would be like, you know, I'm out. This is too much nonsense. But for him to say that Van Halen didn't care about the band's collective success, I'm not buying that part so much. I feel like they only wanted Van Halen to be the forefront of everybody's mind, and Hagar didn't like that. That sounds like more of what the situation is, where, you know, Hagar is shrouding it around the idea that he wasn't able to contribute, when in reality, if he would have been contributing to Van Halen 100%, which he didn't want to, that would have helped the Van Halens feel that he was being more a team player. So on the Van Halen sound, so in Red, the book, Hagar also commented on the band's shift in sound when he joined. He said, when I came in, Van Halen was really good at what they did, but they were a little too one-dimensional for me, and I brought in a different style of writing that helped everything grow. Hagar felt his musical contributions were crucial to the band's evolution and success in the late 80s and early 90s, but Eddie and Alex's resistance to change and their attachment to the original Van Halen sound led to creative clashes. Hagar's desire to push the band in a new direction was a point of contention. In this, I feel that both sides on this have a point, and they're both also wrong. Here's what I mean, and I said it a little bit earlier. When you're Van Halen and you have this massive success, which they did, and you're Eddie Van Halen, one of the greatest guitar players to ever, touch the instrument, and you're famous for that, it can be very difficult to say, you know what, yeah, let's just change the whole thing and we'll just see how it goes. Because you have a brand and a band, and you have consistency with that, and fans that love that. But then on the other side, I can see Hagar going, well, hey guys, why would you bring me into a band that you have no intention of changing? Even though they did change. I think that he's over exaggerating that they didn't want to change, because a lot of people don't care for the Van Hagar era because they thought it was too soft, too pop rock, So they did change, and he's saying they didn't want to change. But again, there has to be this balance between the two, right? It can't just be, hey guys, I know you're this like hard rock band that does solos and kick-ass fucking riffs and stuff. Let's go completely the opposite direction. That's going to meet resistance with any band, not just the Van Halens. In the sense of Hagar, I think he may have overreached beyond the point of what he was brought in the band to do. And I don't think he liked it, and his ego got in the way. And then their ego got in the way, where there could have been this really great mesh between the two, which there were some really great songs and some really great success that they had. And that's where that magic was. But what happens is that one side starts pushing for too much, which causes the other side to push back too much, and then the whole thing just dies. So Eddie, in 1997, in an interview with Rolling Stone, said, Sammy came in with his own agenda. He had his own idea of what Van Halen was supposed to be, and it didn't line up with what we were doing. His ego was too big for the band. Eddie believed that Hagar's increasing ego and desire to take more control over the band's decisions was problematic. Eddie felt that Hagar saw himself as the most important member and often tried to push his own vision over the band's collective goals. So literally, they're both like saying the same thing about one another. Neither of them are even seeing that both of them are kind of the problem here. Because Van Halen is saying that Hagar didn't have a band's collective goal in mind, but Hagar's saying the same thing about those two. And again, it goes back to that gray area right in between, that little Venn diagram type thing. There's this agenda, and there could be some magic between the two. But once one starts eclipsing the other, we got a big problem. They did get back together in the early 2000s. In 2004, Hagar said in an interview in Classic Rock magazine, it was great for a while, but there was still unfinished business, and it wasn't the same as it used to be. His return in the Van Halen 3 reunion tour was a short-lived attempt to mend their relationship. The band's underlying tensions were still present, and issues kept resurfacing, leading to another parting. You start kind of like bringing up one too many things. It's like a relationship. You break up, and then like a month later or 6 months later, you try to like get back together with them, and you're like, oh yeah, this is actually really cool. I think it could work out this time, because you never actually fixed the problem, right? That's the problem. You've masked the problem, and everything seems to have gone away. But then one little comment or one little slip up of something, it all explodes. Eddie's personal struggles had an impact on the band. So Hagar said that in 2008, he said, Eddie is a guy that has to deal with his demons, and I don't think he's ever really worked on that. You can't move forward when you've got all of that going on. And he pointed out that Eddie's ongoing struggles with addictions, personal dramas, it interfered with the band's ability to make a stable working environment, and it only fueled the growing tensions because Eddie was emotionally volatile and was harder to manage. I can believe that. I think that he did get better as time went on. You just mature, you start realizing that you need to start taking better care of your mental health and stuff. Even then, he treated his body so horribly with drugs and alcohol and just the touring life that, it ended up, unfortunately, causing him to pass away at a very young time, and that was really brutal. And actually, I watched a couple of spots with Alex Van Halen. You could tell he's still not doing well with it, and that's understandable. So Sammy's final words on the Van Halen brothers is, I'll never be able to understand why Eddie and Alex treated me the way they did. I'll never know, but I'm fine with it now. I have no hard feelings, but there's no getting over that kind of betrayal. Basically, he's never fully reconciled with the brothers. The sense of betrayal on both sides remains a lasting issue. You know, I think that maybe hate is a strong word. I'm sure there was some hatred during certain periods. I think that Sammy's doing this, reunion type, I don't know, memorial thing with Joe Satriani and Michael. I've heard he's really hard to work with too, even with past band members and stuff. I get that he's the Red Rocker and he's really good at what he does. Those people could still be difficult to work with, and that can suck. What do you guys think about this topic? Do you guys think that they could have eventually worked it out if Eddie Van Halen had lived longer? Do you think that Alex will ever forgive and forget the whole thing? I mean, obviously, Sammy was a huge part of the Van Halen story. I don't know what the relationship with Sammy and Wolfgang is. Maybe I haven't really heard anything. I would think that maybe they could get some things rolling eventually, or at least have some positivity to say about one another. I don't honestly know. Anyway, leave me a comment, like the video, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I will see you in the next video.